Finance Minister Lawrence Wong tells The Big Story the government's policies are reviewed continually and not constrained by legacy thinking.
Sometimes people say, well, why are these things not done faster? Can we do things more quickly? But we should remember the issues we are dealing with are not easy.
Business at Bugis Junction falls by up to 90% as the COVID-19 cluster linked to it continues to grow. And ABBA is back with a new album 40 years after the pop legends broke up. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. In a moment, our interview with Finance Minister Lawrence Wong. But first, the news headlines. Construction company GREATEARTH has begun the process of winding up, a week after it shut down 5 BTO project sites, causing thousands of home buyers to face longer delays. HDB said last week that new contractors will be appointed as soon as possible for the affected sites. Businesses at Bugis Junction are reeling from the drastic drop in footfall since a COVID-19 cluster emerged there on August 24th. Infections at the mall ballooned to 246 yesterday from 20 cases initially. Businesses said they saw a drop in footfall as much as about 90% in the past week, despite measures like deep cleaning and quarantining. Some shops have closed temporarily as it was not worth operating at present or because employees had been infected with the virus. Those working at the mall said staff at department store BHG contributed to at least 70 cases or more than a quarter of those in the cluster. But BHG did not confirm the number of cases linked to its employees. Meanwhile, Transport Minister ISWARAN said there's currently no evidence that clusters linked to bus interchanges have resulted in the virus spreading to commuters. Speaking to the media on the sidelines of land transport industry day to day, Mr. ISWARAN added the priority now is to ensure transport workers as well as commuters are safe and the public transport system continues to function. On how the drivers could have been infected, he said medical experts are still studying the issue.
So far, the experts have said that there's no evidence of any spread to commuters, but we will continue to make sure we observe all the safeguards that have been put in place, and if there is a need to do more, then LTA will work with the public transport operators to do more. But as of now, the priority is to ensure our transport workers are safe, our commuters are safe, and our public transport system continues to function well. How the infection was contracted, I think the medical experts are still studying this, but it's plausible that it may have been contracted from the community. But at the same time, it is also the case that there could have been some spread at the workplace because of the fact that they come together for certain types of activities. When bus captains are affected, then naturally the concern will be how does it affect bus services. As of now, there is no major impact. But of course, this is something that, as you can well understand, we are tracking very closely because we need to make sure that the bus captains are well enough to do their job and do their job safely.
Last night, 21 new cases were added to the 8 bus interchanges clusters, bringing the total number to 341. The Toa Payoh bus interchange cluster has the highest number of cases with 104. Yesterday, the Land Transport Authority announced several new measures to reduce the risk of transmission, like segregating staff resting and dining areas. Bus drivers and staff manning service counters will also have to undergo routine testing at least once a week. The COVID-19 pandemic is the toughest challenge Singapore has faced in decades. And as we transition to the virus becoming endemic, the challenge is to generate new growth, jobs and prosperity for the future. In his National Day rally speech, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong spoke about how Singapore intends to tackle some of the most difficult issues, both economic and social. Well, here to give us more insight into all these plans is Finance Minister Lawrence Wong, a very familiar face on our screens, now most often in his role as one of the co-chairs of the Multi-Ministry Task Force on COVID-19. But Minister, our focus today is not on rising case numbers and growing clusters, but looking ahead to how Singapore can emerge stronger from this pandemic. Minister, thank you so much for setting aside time to come on to the show. Let's talk broadly first, Minister. The measures PM announced in his National Day rally aim at bridging fault lines of income, nationality and race as well as religion. What is the government's end game in making these moves?
Well, Haryanto, I think it's important that we do not see these announcements in isolation. We've been thinking about these issues for some time, and they form part of a broader agenda for the government. We've said that we want to emerge stronger from COVID-19, and that applies not just to the economy, but also to our society. In fact, earlier this year, I spoke at an IPS forum, and I talked about how we want to strengthen our social support and safety nets. The pandemic has given us greater impetus to do this because we can see the stresses and strains on Singaporeans, and we do not want to see permanent fault lines being created. And that's why we have been thinking about this, and we are making these moves. And our aim is to emerge from this as a fairer and more equal and more just society. A society where every Singaporean will have a share in the nation's progress, where every Singaporean matters and will have a place in society, and where all of us are good stewards of the future, always thinking about how we can leave behind a better Singapore. So all of the moves that we have been making over the past year, from the Singapore Green Plan to budget support measures and the latest announcements by the Prime Minister at the National Day rally, are with this aspiration in mind. If you ask what's the end game, the end game is to see a fairer, greener and more inclusive Singapore in the future.
Minister, talking about the measures that PM spoke, some of the measures to lift the lot of lower wage workers, like increasing their wages and workfare payouts, as well as providing transitional support for businesses, they will all come with a hefty bill for businesses and even government as well. How are we going to bear these costs?
In the end, all of us will have to pay for it. I mean, whether it's government or businesses, in the end, all of us as Singaporeans have to pay for it. Because if we believe, and I'm sure all of us do, that we want our lower wage workers to have a share in the fruits of Singapore's progress and to do better in life, then we must do our part to contribute to this outcome. We can't just talk about this. We have to make it happen. So businesses have to adjust. They will have to pay their lower wage workers more. The government will help them in this process. We are already planning to do this by expanding workfare to directly top up the incomes of workers. And we will work out a transition support package for businesses to help cushion the impact on business costs. We are working out the details, and when we are ready, we will announce the package. At the same time, all of us as consumers, ultimately, we have to do our part and chip in. So when we go out to buy something, wherever it is, it may be a little bit pricier and we may have to pay a little more, but that will help benefit the wages of our lower wage workers directly. And I think that's something all of us should be prepared to do, because in the end it speaks to our values, who we are, what we stand for, and the kind of society we want to be, that everyone should matter and we should all move forward together as one people.
And everyone has a part to play in that.
Absolutely.
Right, in achieving that. Minister, the measures to support lower wage workers will take time to see fruit. Some of the progressive wage model targets are set all the way to 2029. What sort of vision or goal should we expect in the new decade come 2030? Will our society see workers in lower wage professions being paid much better, respected even?
Sure. In fact, we are not working off a blank slate. We've been doing a lot of things in the past few years. We've been putting in place workfare, progressive wage models across different sectors, and we are seeing tangible outcomes. So the latest announcements, the latest moves we are making will expand the progressive wage approach to the vast majority of lower wage workers. And we are doing it as fast as we can. In 2 years, we will implement this expansion of the progressive wage approach. So we are not holding back at all. We are moving as fast as we can, as fast as in terms of bringing consensus across all the stakeholders and implementing the measures with due dispatch. Some of the targets you talked about, which go beyond the next 2 years, they are really there because with progressive wages, we are not just setting baseline wages. We are creating a wage ladder. And we want the incomes of lower wage workers to continue rising, not just doing one time, but continue rising, preferably faster than the incomes of median workers. So we want to see year after year substantial wage increments for our lower wage workers, and these increments ought to be in line with the increase in skills and productivity. So we are also investing in this area, and all that takes time. But we will get there, and we will see over time income gaps continuing to be reduced and getting closer to our ideal of becoming a fair and just society. But I should also say that achieving this goes beyond incomes, because at the end of the day, there will always be income differences across every job in Singapore, in any society for that matter. But the value of a job cannot be defined solely by income. It cannot be counted in dollars and cents. And we've seen this throughout the pandemic. The contributions of our frontline and essential workers are so important in helping us keep safe and fight the virus. So I hope the moves that we are making will bring about not just a closing of the income gap, but a change in our mindsets too, that we truly value each individual for their contributions and their worth. Regardless of the job they do, we honor everyone and we give them the dignity and respect that each person deserves. And I think that goes a far longer way in enabling us to be more cohesive, to be more united, and in moving forward together.
Minister, so we've talked about, bridging incomes. We've talked about, the issue of, building a fair society, inclusive society for everybody. Just to round up our discussion for today, there was also some concern as to why climate change was not talked about when it's such an existential, issue. And you talked about, Green Plan briefly as well just now. And this issue, especially for the youth, it is a pertinent issue. What are your thoughts on this?
Sure, it is a very important issue. But as I said just now, we shouldn't look at the speech in isolation. It's not possible for any one speech to cover everything. Yeah. Climate change is a very important issue for us. And that's why not too long ago, we launched the Singapore Green Plan with very ambitious targets over the next 10 years to push the frontiers of sustainable development. We are also reviewing the level and trajectory of our carbon tax, and we will announce that in the coming budget. So we are making a lot of significant changes in the next few years to reduce our emissions, but going beyond that to put us in a strong position to achieve net zero emissions as a country as soon as we can. That's a very ambitious goal. Yes. For Singapore, because we are such a small little city state and we have so few options in terms of renewable energy, but we are determined to make that happen, and so we are studying carefully how we might go about doing this. But I should also perhaps make a broader point that everything the government does really is about serving and governing with the interest of Singaporeans at heart. Because the government is elected by the people and our mandate comes from the people. And so with that in mind, we will continue to review and update our policies continually. Nothing is cast in stone. We are not constrained by legacy thinking or existing ways of doing things. Right? We will continue to review and see how we can do better. Sometimes people say, well, why are these things not done faster? Can we do things more quickly? But we should remember the issues we are dealing with are not easy. There are no silver bullets, there are no magic formulas, there are no instant answers. It would be easy to come up with sort of cosmetic changes just for political gestures or for symbolic effect and pretend that the problem is solved. But that's not how we do things in Singapore. That's not how the government operates. Instead, we have always been upfront with the challenges. We have been upfront with Singaporeans about the issues we have to deal with, deliberated carefully each time we have to deal with a challenge, and then work very hard to try and find the best way forward. And that's not easy. It requires a lot more hard work, but there is no substitute for this sort of painstaking work. It may seem slow at first, but in the end, I think we will achieve a lot more together.
Minister, it's a pleasure to have you on our show, and thank you so much for your insights as well as setting aside time once again of your busy schedule to come and
Thank you.
to come onto our show. Looking overseas, police in New Zealand have shot and killed a violent extremist who was known to the authorities. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said he stabbed and wounded at least 6 people in a supermarket in Auckland before he was killed within 60 seconds of starting the attack. We are also following developments out of Japan, where Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said he will not run for the ruling party's next leadership election. This effectively ends his term after just 1 year. Our Japan correspondent Walter Sim has more.
Well, he told the press today that his decision to step down was because it would be impossible to manage both campaigning for an LDP presidential election on September 29th, as well as to oversee COVID-19 measures at the same time. But experts say that this reasoning is flawed in a way because his decision came very suddenly, and until today, he has been saying that he wanted to contest the LDP election. So to wave a white flag at this juncture, experts say, suggests a very political calculation that it would be better to bow at this point rather than to run the risk of losing, given how his approval ratings have really sunk amongst the public. So his withdrawal, I think, has really thrown the LDP presidential race wide open. So people like former Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida, as well as Administrative Reform Minister Taro Kono, have said that they are interested in running. It remains unclear at this point who exactly will be Japan's next Prime Minister, and I think this is going to be the focus in coming weeks as campaigning starts to heat up.
And exciting news for music fans. 40 years after breaking up, the Swedish pop legends ABBA are back with a new album. Now in their 70s, the quartet will also appear in a series of digital concerts as well as avatars resembling their 1979 appearance when they were in their prime. The Swedish group achieved more than 400 million album sales over 50 years. Now those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman. Stay safe and have a good weekend.